Okay. All right, let's give me a demonstration for working on this practice tonal shading worksheet. So, pretty much we're just going to follow the directions that's on this worksheet. I'm just going to guide you with what you need to do and just give you some helpful tips on like doing the drawing itself. All right, so it's asking you to use a pencil to copy the tones that you see in each of the shapes, and also this what they call like a value scale as well. So I would first start with the value scale first, and then you can do a rendering of this three-dimensional sphere. So now it does mention to either smudge with your finger and the graphite, so we're just gonna cross that out. I'm gonna leave some blenders at your table, so you could use this to do the blending and shading. Okay, but don't use your fingers. Use this blender. This is gonna work a lot better than the finger. All right. Okay, but pretty simple though. I would just start off on this side here. Now, because of my Xerox copy, it didn't really capture all the different values though. But you ideally want to start off with like a white down here, and then this should be a little bit of a gray right here, and then this should go into like a darker tone here. These are like supposed to be two different darker tones. This is like a darker gray, and this should be like your dark. So. Okay, now the way I like doing these like practice value scales though, and this is just a way to practice and control your mark making. So this will allow you to capture like the correct values, and there's a couple different ways you can control the values. Either the how much pressure you put with the pencil, and then the other aspect is also how much shading you incorporate on each of these areas. All right, but what I typically like to do though is, obviously the first one white here. This part here, I'm going to shade it as light as possible. So like I am barely touching the paper at all, and then I'm just shading this part right here. And if you want to just do like a couple of lines, that's fine too. All right, so there's a couple of different ways you can shade the drawings. I'm gonna shade a little bit darker here, but if you want to just do like a single hatching, which is like this is single hatching here, or you're just doing lines in one direction here, or I'll kind of zoom in a little closer so you guys can see. So I'm just doing single hatching right here, where it's like I'm just shading in one direction, going this way like this. You can also do cross hatching too, which is doing in one direction like this, and then going in the opposite direction like this here. This will obviously make it a little bit darker if you do cross hatching. But I would either use one or the other techniques, but either or techniques that we use, it won't really matter because we're going to use the blenders to blend the values together. Okay, so we're gonna just blend with this anyway. So either or technique though is gonna produce the same look no matter what. Unless if you don't want to blend the values, you don't have to. But I would just try it out though, just experiment with it, just because it creates a little bit more of a softer tone or softer look to it. But either or is gonna result in the same thing. So I'm just gonna shade this part very, very lightly. And you really can't even see what I'm shading here. So this is like the lightest gray that you could possibly get. So I'm just gonna do a few lines. I'm gonna try my best to shade in the whole area. Okay, the only thing you don't really want to do though is you don't want to leave it any areas white though. This one I would do a couple areas white though. Okay, then you would move on to the top. This one you can kind of get closer mimicking to this value here. So I'm gonna go a little bit darker here. I'm going to shade in more of those areas over there, and keep moving upward as I go along. Okay, now there's a couple of different ways you're going to work on this though. You can, if you want to, you can actually do the same value for like all the values up here. So I'm doing the same value here, same value here as well, and just, take your time with it too. Moving a little bit quickly, just because I like to try to keep the video 10 minutes long. But once you kind of like establish more values, though, like this is obviously my lightest. This is a little bit darker. then I could add layers to it as well. So, I can add a second layer here to get it closer to this value here. Okay. So now I get closer in value up here. And then this one I can add one layer here, or I could even press even harder with my pencil to get it closer to the next value. So this one I can go a little bit darker. And it says to use like the side of the pencil, so try to use the side of the pencil because you'll get more of like a softer tone with it as well. Okay, so you can see like how my value is kind of transitioning. Now, when you use the blenders, okay, try to shade in most of it though. But when you use the blenders though, it is gonna make it like slightly darker because it's kind of mixing in the graphite that you put on the paper. So just kind of keep in mind though when you use the blender though, the value is gonna end up a little bit darker than before. Okay, so they're gonna end up a little bit darker, which is fine. But you can use this blender to start to shade in the areas. So this will help to get rid of like the pencil marks in a way, but it'll create more of like a softer shadow with the areas that you shade in. Okay, now don't use your fingers though, just because if you use your fingers, sometimes there's like oils on your fingers and like it'll kind of mess up like the shading. So just kind of be careful of that when you guys are using your fingers. You always want to use like the the blenders that I've given you. Okay, and then if it's not dark enough though, you can always shade it over again. So you always want to build up the layers when you're shading to get those values. So you can shade a little bit, blend it. So you'll kind of go back and forth with the shading and blending until you get like that desired value that you want. All right. So you'll keep going, up here. I could probably go a little bit darker than this, but the last one, though, this one's probably the easiest one. This one, you can just press as hard as you can with your pencil. This is your darkest value. Okay, but you kind of get the idea, though. I'm just pressing as hard as I can, and I'm just filling in this space, though. Okay, so that's to do that value scale. So it'll give you a little practice on like controlling your mark making. How hard you press the pencil to get like a dark value, how lighter you get. I always find it challenging to get the lightest possible values. Usually we have like what we call like a little gummy eraser to make things lighter if we need it lighter, but I'll probably have you guys use that when we actually work on the project. But for this practice though, try your best to go as light as you can though. Now when you move on to the sphere though, okay, it's pretty much like you're just copying the sphere that's down here. So I'll just draw like the rest of the sphere here. So don't mind my Xerox copy, it's not that great. Okay, but same idea though is, you want to use those same values. So like your lightest lights are going to be like right here. Your darkest darks are going to be up here. And then your darkest dark will be like right here where like the shadows are. Okay, so you want to just shade it the same way. So when it comes to the 3D spheres or anything that's three-dimensional though, I would always start with like your lightest values. So I'm just doing very lightly all the way around the edges here. Okay, you can kind of shade in any direction you want. I always like using single hatching. You could do single or cross hatching. Again, it really doesn't matter too much. And if you look at it though, it's kind of shading like all different types of directions. So you can try experimenting with shading in different directions too. It's fine as well. The most important thing though is you just fill in that space that you need. So we're just filling in this light area right here. So we're just leaving this part in the middle white. I want I'll try my best to fill in as much as I can, so but I'm just doing it in a very light value. Okay, now, if you don't shade enough of it though, you try to use the blender. You're gonna be really fighting with the blender though, because you really have to have some of the pencil marks on there to able to blend. Okay, so if you're having trouble with blending, you probably need to shade a little bit more. Okay, now this is pretty good here. Now, if I want to just shade too, so a couple different approaches you can go about. You can shade first and then add values. So this is like one method of doing it is, I'm just shading it first here. So I did my lightest value here. I'm just shading it now. See how it looks. So, you can get like that light value. All the shading doing is just moving your pigment around. So, you can move it right away, or if you want to do like more shading, you can. Okay, it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. I always like doing it in this order just because it kind of gives me an idea of like what I need to shade, what it looks like at the meantime. So now after I've blended it in, I can go a little bit darker on the areas that needs to be darker. So it's gonna be darker like around like this part here. Okay, but the trick though is you want to go from like a dark to a light, because it's really tricky to go from a dark to a light. Because one of the things I don't have, I don't have a gummy eraser for y'all. So, okay, hold on. It's on it. We don't have gummy erasers, so I'll explain what those things are later. But it is a way where you can make the some areas from a dark to a light. Okay, but we're just slowly building up these values. So it's a little bit darker here, and I'm actually gonna do it like the other way. So this way, I'm just gonna just shade it a little bit darker now. So just shade. You can kind of go in any order you want. This part's gonna be a little bit darker now. I'm just still continuing with the single hatching that I'm doing. Shading in one direction. And then eventually this part's going to be like your darkest dark, so I'm going to press my pencil as hard as not as hard as I can, but I'm going to press it pretty hard so you get that darker value. Yeah, you could probably do most of your shading first and then blend it. It's up to you. You can go back and forth like I did in the beginning. And then this part's going to be like a dark value too, so... Alright, and then you can go with the blender, shade it. So it's going to soften up your areas that you're shading, that you're drawing. But you kind of get the idea though. Alright, now there is a little bit of like a rim lighting on the bottom, so if you want to do the rim lighting, you can use like the eraser on your pencil. You can just erase that at the end. So just a little fine detail if you want to add that at the end. You can erase it, refine the drawing. Yeah, but you kind of get the idea though. Alright. Okay, when you're done with the worksheet, it should look like, that's actually pretty good. It should look like this though when you're done. This one I spent a little bit more time on. But, you can see like, these values are kind of blending in, so like I stated before though, don't feel bad if like it's not perfect. Okay, even I'm not perfect myself. But just try your best to like go from like a light to a dark value, and this is really just all practice. Okay, and then practice shading the sphere the same as like the bottom here. All right.